G'day everyone, Mitch here again, and welcome back to your favourite Model T Ford channel. In this video, as promised, I will be having a discussion with Stephen from Ontario, Canada, and he runs the Flivver channel, of which I will pop a link in the description to his channel. I strongly encourage you to go and check his channel out, some really great stuff on there. So in this video, we have quite an in-depth discussion about Model T Fords in general, how we came to own them, the experiences we've had with them along the way, little tips and tricks about parts and so on. Anyway, it was quite an in-depth discussion we had. So if you haven't noticed already, the video is quite long. It does run for an hour and a half, so I strongly recommend that you go and get yourself a cup of coffee to sit down and enjoy the video with. With all that said, enjoy the show.
Hi, and welcome to Flivver Channel Talks. Today I'm talking with Mitch Taylor from New South Wales in Australia. Mitch's Model T videos are required viewing for all Model T enthusiasts. Mitch has some of the most viewed, most watched Model T videos on the interweb. And for good reason. They're really fun and very informative. Mitch, welcome to Flivver Channel Talks.
G'day, mate. Thanks for having me on your channel.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure. I've wanted to have you on for some time. I know when I first got interested in Model Ts just a couple of years ago, I immediately found your videos and was binge watching them and really enjoying them. And it's great to have a chance to talk to you here virtually in person.
Yeah, and look, it's great to finally talk to somebody outside of Australia about Model Ts. There's there is a bit of a following for them here, but nowhere near as much as say in the US or in your case Canada, of course.
Do you run into other Model T owners at car shows or tours or anything like that?
Not as many as I'd like to see, to be honest. Down the road from where I live, there's actually a motor museum. Well, it's actually a motorcycle museum, and I know the owner very well. I say most of what he has there is bikes, but he does have a few vintage cars as well, some high wheelers, and he literally has one Model T in his collection, and I've seen it once. It's a 1913 Roadster, I think it is, but he very rarely gets it out. I don't think it's even road registered at the moment. So there was one other Model T in the car club that I'm a member of. But he's since moved away. He lives about 6 hours drive away now, so I haven't seen him since.
Yeah.
So to the best of my knowledge, mine is actually the only Model T on the road in quite a big radius of where I live, actually. No, tell a lie. No, there is one other one. There is a gentleman down the road who has a TT truck.
Okay.
But again, it spends most of its time in the garage. I haven't seen it on the road. I've been around to his house a couple of times and seen the truck, but as I say, mine's basically the only one that gets seen on the roads around here.
Yeah. It's funny, even around here. There's quite a few Model Ts in people's garages, but I never see them out and about. I've never bumped into another Model T on the road. I don't go to a lot of car shows. I'm just in this little rural part of Canada, and the local car shows here are all hot rods and muscle cars for the most part. I'm usually the only pre-war car there. It's even fairly rare that there's a Model A at the shows, I find. But they're around. I know two other people here in Paris who are real Model T enthusiasts, and they're both working on their cars with the view to getting them on the road and doing tours and that sort of thing. But over the last couple of years anyway, I feel pretty alone when I'm out of my T. And you'll see that in my videos when I'm out in the country roads around here, there isn't even other modern cars for the most part. It can be pretty quiet out once you get onto the gravel and out into the rural areas.
Yeah. And just adding on to what you're saying about car shows, I'm pretty much in the same situation. I actually, when was it, 2 weeks ago, I attended a car show about an hour's drive south, and well, an hour in a modern car anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
And
If you start measuring in Model T distances, everything's double.
yes, easily. Anyway, interestingly, mine wasn't the oldest car there, which made a nice change. There was a 1913 Fiat there, which I think I must have spent nearly half the day talking to the owner. It was very interesting.
Yeah.
But for the most part, when I go to car shows, mine generally is the oldest one there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and yours is a 24. Is that right?
24. Yeah. Yeah.
Touring.
Yeah. So yeah, turns 100. Yeah, touring, and turns 100 years old this year. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now it's a remarkable example of what looks to me from your videos to be an incredibly original, unmodified 24 touring. I mean, from what I see, it looks incredibly authentic and correct, I guess is the right word.
Yeah.
Did
Yeah, you're
is that
absolutely.
what you? Go ahead, sorry.
Sorry, yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And look, when I bought the car, excuse me, back in 2011, one of the first things I made a point of, I made a promise to myself that this car is going to stay as original as it can possibly be. It's not going to be turned into a hot rod, as I've been asked. If I was given $1 for every time I got asked, "Oh, when are you going to put a V8 in it?" I think I'd probably be
Oh,
a millionaire by now.
oh, I get so tired of those questions at the car shows. I know. It's
I
like,
mean,
oh,
okay, look,
yeah.
in fairness, most of the people that ask me that question are usually age 16 or younger, but still, it doesn't make it hurt any less.
Yeah, yeah. No, I hear you. Yeah, that's good. So that particular car, how did you go about finding it? How did you come by that car? Maybe we should even back up. What got you interested in Model Ts, and then why did you go hunting for that car?
Yeah, good question. Look, I've basically had an interest in like vintage and veteran cars ever since I was about, what would it be? I was about 6 or 7 years old. Um, at the time, I was living in Albany, which is a small town down the bottom corner of Western Australia. And at the time, there was a motor museum there. I was fortunate enough when we did go to see it. It was actually when we first moved to Australia. I'm actually from the UK originally. So anyway, when we went to see this museum for the first time, at the time, I don't know if you've heard of the film Genevieve.
No, I'm not familiar with that one.
I'd recommend looking it up. It came out in 1953. It's quite an old film, but it actually centres around the London to Brighton veteran car run.
Okay, yep.
And so Genevieve is a French car. I think it's called a Darracq. It was built in 1904, and the other car that stars in it is a Dutch car, a 1904 Spiker. Anyway, these two cars they starred in this particular movie, and one of them, Genevieve, the actual title, the star of the film, as it were. Ultimately ended up in the hands of the owner of this particular car museum in Western Australia. So
Oh,
I
okay.
got to see the car from the movie in the
Mm-hmm.
museum while it was spending some time in Australia. Now, tragically, the owner of the museum, Paul Terry, he passed away. I think it was in 1993 or 94 in a
Mm-hmm.
helicopter crash, unfortunately.
Oh.
So his entire vintage car collection and ultimately the museum was all sold off, which is a big shame. But
Mm-hmm.
so that's what basically got me hooked on old cars. There was something about them from a very young age, just how an old car looked that I just found intriguing. Right from 6 or 7 years old. So I lost count of the number of Lego models actually that I made of vintage cars. I never made any models of modern cars. They were always, really old cars. And then as I got older, and when I was in my early 20s, and we lived down in Tasmania at the time. And there's a motor museum down there as well, which is actually home to the oldest known Ford car in the world that's
Hmm.
still on the road. It's a 1903 Ford Model A. I believe it's chassis number 34 or 35, something like that. One of the very first vehicles to come from Ford Motor Company, anyway. Um, so it turns out it's actually the equal oldest Ford car in the world. The other one, which is only literally one chassis number difference, Ford Motor Company themselves actually own that car, I believe.
Hmm.
Anyway, so I had the opportunity to see that particular collection of early Fords from there. And he's the owner of all these vehicles has the '03 Model A, and then he's got every model, well, almost every model up to the Model T. So he's also got the Model F, the Model K.
Wow. Wow. What a collection. Holy cow.
He's got a Model N, Model S, and a Model T. Sorry, two Model Ts actually. So as you can imagine, I was right in my element when when I visited that museum.
Yeah.
And it wasn't long after that I decided, I'd like to buy a Model T, and get involved in the hobby and that. So it was when we moved up here to New South Wales in 2010, and I started having a look around. And at the time, at first I wanted to buy a Model T in Australia, of course.
Hmm.
But the cheapest I could find at the time, I think, was about $50,000 or $60,000. For some strange reason,
Wow.
for some strange reason, people in Australia think, oh, it's really old, it must be worth a fortune, and they ask stupid money for it. But
Hmm.
of course, the Model T being such a mass-produced vehicle, at the time at least, they didn't hold them to such high value in the US.
Hmm.
And the very first Model T that I found for sale in the US, and I looked at several, but it was actually the very first one I looked at, pardon me, was the one that I actually bought, and that's the one you see in the videos.
Oh, okay. So you bought it sight unseen from the United States?
Not sight unseen technically. I mean, I did get in contact with the owner of it. Actually, you might have even heard of him. I think his name is what's his name? Guy Zaninovic. He's quite well known in the Model T community.
Mm.
He's on the forum as well.
Right.
He was actually selling it on behalf of the owner who'd actually passed away, unfortunately.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, that's how that came about. And um, he sent me a lot of pictures of it, which I've still got all the original photos he sent me of it.
Right.
Um, and I thought, well, okay, well, this guy sort of sounds, legitimate and all that. And
Hmm.
I did a background check on him as sort of as best I could with, with what you can do on the internet. But
Hmm.
as it turns out that, yeah, he's quite well known and respected in the Model T community. So I
Hmm.
was very fortunate with that it wasn't just, some random guy selling a car out of his garage sort of thing. He
Right.
was,
Right.
yeah. And then of course I had to get it home to Australia.
Hmm. Now, were you looking for a touring particularly, or is that just what it happened to be when you found the right car?
No, funnily enough, I was actually looking for a touring. I looked at the different body styles out there, and I would absolutely have loved to got a centre door, but they're incredibly rare and incredibly
Yes.
expensive if you can find one. But
Yeah. Yeah.
no, I like the idea of the touring. It's nice and open, and you can put the top down, and
Hmm.
it's great, particularly during the summertime here. Although, funny story though, I tend to drive it around mostly with the top up anyway, because driving it around in the blazing Australian sun with the top down, no, it's not fun.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I guess I'm lucky that way. I drive mine almost always with the top down because even in the summertime, on a hot day, it's not that hot and the sun isn't that
No.
intense here. So it's very pleasant for the most part. And I find it much quieter when the top's down. So it's kind of
Okay.
a more pleasant drive if I know I never go very fast, obviously. So yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, that's cool. So you imported it from the U.S. So it's a U.S. made car,
correct. Yeah,
which is also a little unusual, I expect, in Australia, because as I as I understand it, and I'm not a Ford historian by any means, but as I understand it, the normal import path for Model Ts in the day, they were made in Canada at the Windsor plant
yeah,
and shipped to all the Commonwealth countries for tax reasons and for reasons of right hand, left hand drive and that sort of thing.
yeah.
Yeah, so even if you do bump into other Model Ts out there, they're more than likely going to be made in Canada cars, I expect.
Yeah, so the you're right. You're absolutely right. So the Model Ts that came to Australia specifically to be sold from Ford dealerships in Australia, yes, they were built in Canada. So what they basically did was they assembled the chassis, engine, transmission, running gear, and everything, and put the steering wheel on the right hand side of the car. And then those the rolling chassis were actually that was all they exported from Canada. They didn't have a
Hmm.
body on them or anything.
Right.
The majority of Model Ts in Australia, they were received down in Melbourne, and they went to the most common one is what we call the Geelong body Model T because the Ford factory was in Geelong, so that made sense. And as I say, yeah, the coach builders down there put essentially Australian bodies on them because and they
Oh,
based
okay.
them. They basically, yeah, that's why if you ever see a picture of a quote unquote Australian Model T looks completely different to the ones that come out of the US because the coach builders here basically came up with their own body style for them.
Interesting. Oh, okay. That's neat. Yeah, it's kind of funny. My Model T is also a U.S. made car. The a
Yep.
fellow who my father bought it from imported it in the early 2000s from Wisconsin. So both you and I are not in the U.S., had originally access theoretically to Canadian made cars, and both of us are driving USA made Model Ts.
USA. Yep.
Well, it does make it easier to find parts and that sort of thing, having a USA car,
Yeah.
that's for sure.
Yeah,
Hmm.
for sure. Oh, look, the parts even on the Canadian ones, the parts are basically the same. It's only the fact that the steering wheel's on the other side of the car.
Mm.
Pardon me, and the bodies are a little bit different.
Hmm.
It would make it a bit different, a bit difficult for an Australian one if you needed body panels because you won't be able to get them out of the US.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, someday I'd like to have a Canadian Model T just to kind of own both, but I don't have room nor time nor money for that right now, so that's a someday.
Yeah, yeah.
They
Oh,
most people
it,
find
it'd be
that they
nice.
reproduce, but
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. No, you're exactly, you're absolutely right. I'd say it would be nice to have another Model T, and if I was to get another one, I'd like to get a brass era one, so pre
oh,
1916. That'd be would be great. But
mhm.
then at the same time, I don't really want to be spending every weekend out there polishing brass. So that was another reason to get a 1920s one. There's no brass on it.
Hmm. Yeah, yours is probably one of the most maintainable, easy to look after, drivable Model Ts out there. Anything from about that period to the to 27 are very low maintenance vehicles for the most part.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, mine's a 26, so I've got the newer body style with very little wood. Um, and
Okay.
mine's the Roadster runabout um, type with
Yeah.
the only the front seat. So really, it's two people and that's it. But it does have a huge trunk and storage under the seat because the fuel tank's in the cowl. So it's actually got a lot of room
Yes.
in it for tripping and that sort of thing. I was going to ask about the wood. The wood. How much wood is in your car?
Well, except for the body, it's all bloody wood.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no. Inside the body panels and the doors and everything, the timber structure is there. That's right.
Hmm. And it's in good condition?
Yeah, I have actually had the door linings off on one occasion to have a look at the condition of the wood, and it's in very good condition. Actually, there's no rot in it or anything.
Oh, that's good news. Yeah, that's a big job. I have a friend here in Paris who's building a touring about the same vintage as yours, and he's had to basically replace all the wood. I don't know more than a few little pieces that he was able to keep as he's doing his
Yeah,
restoration. So he's become quite an adept woodworker in order to restore an old car.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, mine has very
yeah.
little wood, just a few little blocks here and there and that sort of thing. They used to call it the all steel Model T, and that's fair. There isn't much wood in it, I'd have to say.
Yeah. I'm wondering maybe that I mean that's probably one area about Model Ts that I don't know an awful lot about, if I'm honest, is literally how the bodies and everything were put together on them. I just
Yeah.
assumed that all Model Ts had a wooden frame inside the body, but obviously not. That's not the case.
Not come 26 again, always to reduce cost and labor. They
Yeah,
stamped out a lot more steel framing pieces for the bodywork and that sort of thing. Although even then, only the runabout, the touring, are mostly steel. Once you go to the enclosed cars, they're still all wood, even in 26 and 27.
yeah. So like your four doors and your Tudors and all of that sort of thing. Yeah,
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah,
and
that's
you
something I didn't relish, is having to do a lot of woodwork. So I was pleased that this car had very little wood and nothing as a big wood project. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, I can't honestly can't say that I'm particularly good at woodwork either. So, well, the funny thing is, a couple of years ago, I did build a grandfather clock from scratch, out of. Oh, speaking of the devil, there it goes now.
That's
Uh,
perfect. Perfect timing.
what are we now? 9:30. Yeah. So, and yeah, I built it using the most basic, joinery skills because I failed woodwork in high school. So I built it to the best of my ability with the very limited knowledge I have, and covered the rest of it up with paint and bog and that to try and make it look good. um, but no, I was pleased with how that turned out. But no, as you say, yeah, with the trying to do the timber work in a Model T, particularly because a lot of the timber work is curved, and yeah, I don't know about you, but my woodworking skills are certainly not up to that sort of standard.
No, I'd have to learn an awful lot. And but if you get yourself a brass tea, there's a lot of wood in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that one might just have to remain a dream. I think.
It's good. That's one of the things about Model Ts, is they're great dreamers cars for those of us that like to go back in time every time we get behind the wheel and just trundle off into the countryside.
Yeah. Oh, they're just so much fun. You never get bored driving a Model T. I found if you want some excitement, go and drive a car that basically has no brakes. You'll be enjoying yourself.
Yeah, especially through town. Oh my goodness. Yep, I hear you.
I was going to ask, have you got Rocky Mountain brakes on yours?
No, mine is bone stock original in the brakes department. Just well, I've got the larger brake drum in the transmission that they introduced in 26, but that's
Yep.
the only pedal brake, as you know. And then there's the parking brake, which I suppose you could grab in an emergency if you were really trying to come to a stop.
I
But
think you'd
no,
have
I
to be
don't.
desperate.
Yeah, I haven't needed to reach for that yet. I hope I never do, but I've always got it in the back of my mind that if something goes wrong in my rear axle, that's my only stopping option.
Yeah, Yeah, spot on again, because I know that originally the thrust washers in the rear end, in the rear axle, were made of white metal or Babbitt, whatever you want to call it. And later on they introduced replacements made of brass, and I'm pretty sure that was already done on my Model T before I bought it, because now you're right, if those thrust washers go, then you're going to find it almost impossible to stop.
Yeah, it's just like a little child's go-kart at that point. You're just steering with string and trying to put your feet down or something.
And try and find something soft to crash into. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, let's hope not. No, there's very few add-ons to my car. It was pretty darn original, I have to say. Somebody painted it a long time ago. You can tell from the paint job. There's even the second paint job's flaking off here and there. But it seems to be, just repaired over and over and over the course of its life, but never restored. Yeah.
Yeah, I looked at the possibility of having mine repainted, because if you look at mine up close, the paint is starting to lift in places. Like there's very, very, very tiny, and I mean really tiny, sort of bubbles on the paintwork. I had a professional, so someone involved in that sort of thing, come and had a look at it for me, and he said, yeah, the paint's lifting, but it hasn't gone through to the metal. Which is fortunate, because I live, I'm only about line of sight about 10 kilometers from the ocean here, so my Model T lives in the garage all the time, of course, but so I was worried that salt was getting into it and starting to rust the body, but no, fortunately it hasn't. It's just the paint is starting to blister, but you can't really see it unless you're looking up really close to it. So and he gave me a quote to respray, to repaint the whole car, which meant basically taking the body panels off, sandblasting them, taking it back to bare metal, and then repainting the whole lot. The price I got, I think, was about $22,000, excluding paint.
Oh my goodness! So it's going to stay as it is.
Yeah, it's staying as it is. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Now, do you think that's original paint, or was it repainted at some point?
I'd like to think it's original paint, but I don't think it is. No, my understanding is that the car did go through a sort of partial restoration during the 1960s. So to the best of my knowledge, that's the last time it's had paint, fresh paint anywhere near it. So
Right.
even since the 1960s, so that's over, 50, 60 years ago. So
Yeah. It's already.
It's lasted well.
Yeah, and as long as you're not risking rust damage, there's nothing wrong with the old paint. It almost looks, I don't know, I like the look of the old Survivor cars, as long as they're still being preserved.
Yeah, and as I said earlier, now and you talk about preservation. Now I made a point with this car to keep it as original as possible. So, I only use, where possible, like I buy my parts through Snyder's, which in the US. Sometimes I'll get parts from Henry Spares, which is down in Victoria. But he gets most of his parts come from Snyder's anyway in the US. So I say I'll use all as close to genuine or at least reproduction parts as possible.
Yeah.
And if I want to add an accessory to it, then I'll be making sure that it's at least period correct before I consider putting it on.
Yeah. Now, do you have access to any used parts or original parts like at all, or is everything reproduction?
So the only real part that I've had to replace, where I was able to use or in this case it was refurbished, was the starter. The electric starter on it, it failed, and basically the windings in it burnt out. But what I was able to do was send my old starter off to, and it was quite expensive to do actually, because I had to send it to the US. Because that's the way they worked. It was an exchange program. So you send your old starter in, they rebuild it and send you one back, and send you a refurbished one. So I did that, And what else did I have to do? Oh, I had to do something similar with the generator, but at the time, there was a gentleman that lives down in Sydney. I don't even think he's alive anymore, unfortunately. But there was a gentleman down in Sydney that did the same sort of thing, did rebuilds on generators. So I took my old one down there, and he gave me a refurbished one. So yeah, I've done that a couple of times. What else have I had to do? Oh, it's if you're following my channel, you'll see that it's that she's had a new radiator. The old one was it. It wouldn't have been so bad if it developed a leak on one of the outside tubes, but it ended up with a hole on one of the inside tubes, so it was near impossible to. Well, it was impossible, unfortunately, to fix it. Well, I didn't have the expertise to do it anyway. Um, uh, Somebody else would have probably taken the top and bottom tanks off, found the leaking tube, and just capped the tubes. That would have been the best way to do it. But I certainly don't have the skills behind me to do that. So I bought a new radiator. I think it came from. I think it did come from Snyder's actually. But because it had to come over from the States, again, it ended up very expensive. I think I paid about 1,500 Australian for a new radiator for it.
Well, that's what they cost now. Even for me here in Canada, the price of those has gone up so much. You're lucky you did it when you did. They're very expensive now. The price of Model T reproduction parts, especially the big complicated ones like radiators and that kind of thing, is just climbing really quickly compared to the old days, that's for sure.
Yeah,
I hear you. Well, you need to get a couple friends up in the States who you can give a list to and send them off to Hershey every couple of years to get you your used parts. They can put them in a package and put them on the slow boat.
Yeah, I think it's because I made the mistake of having this stuff air freighted. That's why it ended up costing me a fortune.
Yeah, the best thing would be to have visitors who are flying down there, bring them along in their luggage. Might be difficult to explain at the border, but otherwise it's probably the best way to get things.
I can just imagine. I can just imagine that trying to take a Model T Ford radiator and
stranger things have been done. Yeah, that'd be hilarious. Yeah. Even it's been a surprise to me, even here in Canada where I am, how hard it is to get good used parts. There's a few people around who've collected them over their lifetimes, but they tend to hold on to them because they've got Model Ts. And until there's unfortunately an estate sale or something like that, they're not all that available. The flea markets and automotive swap meets and that sort of thing, it's rare you find anything. I know a friend of mine was at one a few months ago, and he found a few old wooden coil boxes. That was kind of the only Model T stuff he found. I know a couple of years ago I was at one, I saw an old NH carburetor that the guy wanted a fortune for. I didn't buy it, but I mean, that was like the only Model T part I found in the whole flea market. So there's not a lot of them around. Now, there's a few bigger flea markets, a few hours drive that I haven't been to. Maybe they're better. I don't know. But in my local area and through my connections, used parts, really, the only way you find them is flea markets or eBay. Which is a surprise to me. I thought they'd be more readily available. Now, down in the States, it's a different situation. They still have the big flea markets that are just flush with parts. But even people that go to them say that it's not like it was 5 years ago, even in terms of the rarity of good parts. So I think these cars are transitioning from being, easy to own antique car because of the availability of parts to becoming a little more like other antique cars that parts are rare and hard to find. Yeah, and I find most of the reproduction parts, they all need a little bit of rework or fitting or something. It's great that we have access to them, but they're not necessarily just bolt and forget. They tend to require a bit of attention.
Yeah, I guess I've been quite lucky on that score. Of the few of the reproduction parts that I have used on my Model T, never really had to make much adjustment to them. I think there was a little bit of fiddling around to get the Rocky Mountain brakes to work properly, but
Oh, was it
since
you?
they've been on.
Was that a new kit or a set of used parts?
No, that was a brand new kit.
Okay.
Most people don't know this. I'm pretty sure they're still around now, but I say most people are not aware that Rocky Mountain Brake Company still actually exists to this day.
Oh, okay. I
The
did not know
same.
that.
No, well, actually, I haven't looked recently. At least they were still in business when I bought my brake kit from them. When would it have been? At least be about 10 years ago now.
Hmm.
And when I put the brakes on there, I did have the help from a friend I had from Sydney at the time to fit them. But we had to do a little bit of adjustment to make them fit, and I think we had to
Hmm.
change we did have to change the bolts that actually hold the back wheel on, because the factory bolts are actually they're too short. But
Hmm.
apart from that, there was very little that I had to change on it,
Well, that's
and
interesting. I
I
didn't
haven't.
know that. I got to look into that because that is something I would be definitely interested in on this car. And I didn't know that they were available as a new kit. Maybe if they still are, that'd be an interesting option because finding a complete used kit is pretty rare. You basically have to buy a car usually.
Oh, look, I don't think it was. I don't think it'd be even possible to find a used kit. Really, I
Yeah,
mean, once somebody puts that on a Model T, I highly doubt they're going to want to remove it.
exactly. Yeah, unless it was crashed or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm. Interesting. Well, I'll definitely look into that because that's any of the period accessories and kits are interesting, but the most interesting ones are the the practical ones that improve the drivability and safety of the car. So, for
Yeah.
example, I'd love to find some old grubbers. Do you know those old belt type shock absorbers that were available for Model T in the
Oh, yeah,
day?
yeah, yeah.
I'd love to find some of those and try them out sometime. And the Rocky Mountain brakes was something I was always interested in. That kind of stuff
Look,
fascinates me, those accessories from the day.
yeah. And it's interesting because and most people seem surprised when I tell them that Rocky Mountain Brake Company actually started. I think it was back in the teens or 20s, somewhere around there. Um, and I think, as my understanding, that one of their first brake kits was actually for a Model T because they were the most common car on the roads back in the
Hmm.
day.
Hmm.
And I was even more surprised to find out that at least up until probably around 2012, 2013, thereabouts, the company still exists,
Hmm.
and still making the kits. So, and I think I paid about back then I paid about $900 for it, which it sounds a lot, but at the end of the day, if your brake band in your transmission fails for whatever reason, I don't like your chances of stopping with a metal on metal parking
Hmm.
brake. So
Yeah. Yeah, all you have to do is stand on the brakes really hard in necessity once, and that $900 was money well spent.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Now, do you have any other period accessories or upgrades like auxiliary transmissions or a Warford rear end or anything like, or Warford gearbox or a Ruxtell rear end or anything like that?
No, no, my car is actually completely stock. I did look at putting a Ruxtell rear end in it once, and I'm thinking, it's a lot of money for something that realistically I'm hardly going to get the benefit from.
Hmm.
So, I mean,
Is
it's
it
a nice accessory to have, but I've kept my car basically stock.
is it pretty flat in your area or very hilly?
Yeah, it's reasonably flat where I live here. That said, though, my Model T is quite good. Is actually very good on hills, except when the fuel tank's nearly empty, as we all know. But no, it handles hills very well, and I think part of that is down to I did actually. You asked me about upgrades, and I suppose this sort of counts. I actually put Champion X spark plugs in it as opposed to just the standard Champion 25s.
Hmm.
And I found that the X plugs, apart from the fact obviously you can take them apart to clean them, so you don't have to replace the plugs every time they get dirty.
Hmm.
And I found that combined with running 98 octane fuel, it runs really well.
So you can climb most hills in your area in high gear.
Yeah, with a good run up, I can.
Yeah, mine's the same. I've just got standard um, bone stock drivetrain, and I can do most of the hills in high gear. It's very rare that I have to climb a hill in first. But I think if there were more hills in my area that required low gear, I would I would soon be looking at a Ruxtol or something because that loses its novelty very quickly, climbing a long hill at that walking pace of the low gear.
Yeah, and also unless you've got unless you've got a very you've got to make sure that your external oil line is clear as well, because if you're climbing a steep hill and you don't have that external oil line working, your rear main bearing's not going to be very happy with you.
Yeah, I haven't had my motor apart yet, so I'm just hoping that everything's okay in there. So far, so good. Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting.
So what
Yeah,
sort of sorry,
no, go ahead.
I was going to ask what assuming you've been for a few drives in yours, what sort of fuel economy are you getting from it?
Um, Less than 20 miles per gallon. Yeah, yeah, mostly around 17, 18, something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if
Do
that's
you find
typical
your
or
car
not.
runs? That sounds about right to me. I think I get about what would it be? Probably 250 to 300 kilometers out of a tank. It all depends on how you run the engine as well. I mean, every Model T is different. I find mine runs quite happily running it quite lean. Whereas I can only imagining where you are being colder, whether you might have to run it a little bit richer. Every Model T is different.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I haven't done a lot of long drives, to be honest. I've never gone on a tour. Um, my longest drive's probably been 3 or 4 hours with a friend just around the area, um, wandering here and there. Someday I'd like to try some longer drives, but yeah, I just love getting out on the gravel country roads and wandering, looking for the narrowest, windiest, most remote little roads in our area that I can find.
It's interesting you say about the gravel roads, and pardon me, I don't know about your Model T, but with mine certainly it seems to handle better on gravel roads than it does on the bitumen. So,
Much
but at
better.
the end of the day, those were the roads that they were
Hmm.
designed to run on in the first place.
Yeah, mine just gets happy the moment you turn off the asphalt onto the gravel. The steering geometry, suspension, everything, just I don't know, it just feels right and the car handles lovely. It's a pleasure to
Mm.
drive until it gets rough, like washboard or something like that. Then the lack of any form of shock absorber really, really gets your attention.
I guess I'm fortunate there's not many gravel roads actually around where I live. There is one that's just down the road where I actually, I think we'll get onto the talking about the drone footage and that where I shot that particular video. That particular gravel road, I'm fortunate they actually, I think every 6 months or so they grade it, so it
Mhm.
stays reasonably smooth.
Nice.
The only thing that really upsets my Model T is when it comes across potholes. It's a bit uncomfortable, but I always found it recovers quickly, and I think a lot of that's because you're not really driving that fast.
Hmm. Yeah, and the big wheels helps a lot. Yep. Hmm.
And the other environment that I found that the Model T is really at home is in muddy environments. A few years ago, I was asked to take a young lady to her wedding, so take a bride to her wedding, and the location for the ceremony was it was down near the river, not far from where I used to live, and the access to the location for the ceremony, it was down a fairly steep hill. It had been raining all morning, so the track down to the bottom of this hill, it was as muddy as, and it was I had to laugh when we arrived because you could see they had a Toyota Land Cruiser 4-wheel drive there, and it was having to pull all the guest cars out because they were all getting stuck. And next thing I know, I turn around and I've got the bride in the back seat of the Model T, and she's crying her eyes out because she had visions of having to arrive at her wedding in a muddy 4-wheel drive. And I said, no, don't worry, I'll get you to your wedding. I said the Model T comes from a time in history where there pretty much weren't any roads, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, no, we'll get you. I'll get you there in the Model T if I have to push it on my hands and knees. So anyway, I drove down this muddy slope, and left and right of me, I could see cars stuck on the grass because I thought, oh, I'll be smart, you know, I'll drive on the grass next to the track, and of course that was even worse.
Mm-hmm.
So all these modern cars are getting stuck, and I just drove straight through, right down to where she was needed, and then afterwards, we had to get out again, and one of these cocky bloody so-and-sos in a 4-wheel drive comes up to me and says, oh, do you want me to give you a tow back up the hill? And I said, just back up, mate. I'll show you how it's done.
Very nice.
And look, and straight back up this hill, and as you know, the Model T, because it's got skinny wheels, they'll just cut straight through the mud until they get a hold on the hard stuff underneath. And that's exactly what happened. Straight back up the hill, no problems at all.
Nice. That's a great story. I like that. I hope you got some photos or footage of that. That's neat.
I think there is some photos somewhere.
I like the idea of the bride the image of a bride in her white dress, all perfect, and the Model T bringing her in all covered in mud. I like that. That's amazing.
It's interesting though. The only mud that it got on it was underneath the guards. So you know the rest of the car stays perfectly clean.
Yeah, it was well designed for its environment at the time, I think. Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
You mentioned drone filming on your T on the gravel roads near there. That I saw that footage of yours. Really, really amazing shots. That I'd love to try something like that someday.
Yeah, and it's. I was expecting it to be somewhat difficult until I did some more research into drones and the technology behind them. It's just incredible. My first, actually, the drone that I shot that one on was one of the first Mavic Pro drones from DJI, and I think at the time, that drone cost me just over $1,000 at the time to purchase.
Mm-hmm.
And once I'd done some reading into it and found the drone has got the ability to, you can basically you put the drone up in the air, and then you're basically monitoring what the drone's doing on your mobile phone screen, or at least it was controlled by my phone on that one, and you could actually tell it. You could select a specific target on the display and say, okay, look, I want the drone to follow that. And basically you just hit record, start driving, and as the drone detects you sort of moving, it'll start moving along with you. So, little inside secret as to how that video came to be there.
That's neat. Yeah. So you didn't need your own drone pilot. You were able to fly it up and then just tell it to follow you, and away you go on your drive.
That's right, and I literally had the controller sitting on the seat next to me so I could keep an eye on what it was doing. And so essentially I was driving the Model T and flying a drone at the same time, which well, it was flying itself.
Yeah. I guess you'd best not go through any tunnels or anything, though.
And actually the other thing that I think in one of those videos you can just about see it, I had to make sure that the drone was flying high enough because on one side of it there was tall trees, and sort of had the road up the middle, and then on the other side was a high voltage power line. So I had to
Oh
be very,
boy.
I had to be very careful.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Oh, I'd love to try that someday. I got to find somebody around here who has a drone and wants to try some of that filming someday. That'd be fun. We'll have to find the right roads, but I think we could around here. We got lots of choices out in the countryside.
Yeah, and that was the biggest challenge I had around here is that most of the roads around here there's a lot of trees around, which makes it difficult.
Hmm.
And that was the only road I could find where it had like minimal trees.
Hmm. That's one thing I really enjoy with the Model T is filming it. Um, it's almost as much a part of my Model T hobby as maintaining and driving the car is just finding ways to film it as as I'm driving about and doing things with the car. It's become
Yeah,
kind of an integral part of what I do with my free time. I enjoy it a lot.
yeah. And I think that was another thing I did as well when I bought my first GoPro. I'm like, well, what's the craziest place I can mount the GoPro on the Model T just to provide something different? And I think
Hmm.
one of the angles I got, I think I clamped it onto the spare wheel on the back, so you got a shot of underneath the car from the back while it was going along. So
Hmm.
yeah, there's lots we can do.
Yeah, yeah. It's a fun vehicle, and it's a fun platform for doing other things with. This summer, I hope to go on my first tour in the area. There's usually one or two in, well, within a few hours drive of here, but I've never done one, so it'll be interesting to see what that's all about. I know it's a big part of the Model T hobby in the U.S. These tours, some of them are quite grand, but it's not something I've participated in yet, so I'm looking forward to that. Do you
Yeah,
have
they do
other
something. Go ahead.
Do you have other antique car enthusiasts in the area you can tour with, or do you need to do all your driving on your own?
No, I'm actually a member of two car clubs in the area. So there's Taree Historic Motor Club. So and there's also the Great Lakes Historic Automobile Club, which I'm a member of both. And the Taree Club in particular does actually every 6 years we actually host an event which we call the Hub Rally. So there's actually six clubs involved in the in the hub. So basically, we sort of work on a rotation system. So each year we take the different clubs take turns at hosting the event. And when it's our turn to host it, then I usually take the Model T along, so like for the local runs and that,
Hmm.
because the vast majority of and that's the unfortunate thing. The vast majority of the cars in both clubs, they're not pre-war. Most people are, they're into the MGs and Peugeots
Hmm.
and all sorts of other stuff, sort of 1940s onwards kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
and every single one of those cars can go a lot quicker than the Model T. So, and that's the main reason why the Model T just doesn't really do like group runs because it'd be left
Hmm.
behind.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, I can't even run with the Model A's really, and there's lots of them around. But
Mm.
if
Oh, here
they're
too.
if they're anxious to go somewhere, I can't keep up. If they're comfortable putting along at my speed, then it can be great. I had a friend who had a Model A, and we used to drive around together a lot. Um, but he was quite comfortable keeping it at my speed, so it was nice.
Yeah. Actually, it was quite funny last year. Pardon me, the Atari Club actually did. It was our turn to host the Hub Rally, and for once that the organisers had actually chosen a route that was actually quite local. I thought, oh, excellent! I'll be able to actually take the Model T out on this one. Only thing is, on the day that they actually held the run, it was absolutely pouring with rain, and I don't have any side curtains on my Model T, so
Hmm.
that it was a shame that I didn't participate in the Model T. No, I drove the car that I had at the time, which I think it couldn't be more modern. At the time I was driving a Tesla, so um,
You'll get lots of
it
attention.
it stood out like a sore thumb. So
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I don't have side curtains yet either. It's my list of things I would like to do in my car is very long, and my time available is very short. So that's another item is make side curtains someday. But
Yeah.
no, I haven't done so. I think someday I'm going to be out on a driver tour and really regret that I haven't made those yet.
Yeah, yeah. And I have driven my Model T in the rain, not out of choice, of course. On both occasions, I got caught out. The first occasion, I was out driving, probably about 10, 15 kilometers from home, and the wind started to pick up. And I thought, okay, I better start making a heading for home. And I barely made it halfway home, and it absolutely started pouring. It couldn't just drizzle, could it? No, it had to. It was absolutely pouring, and on top of that, the wind had picked up. So there were branches, tree branches being dropped on the road in front of me, and so it put my driving skills to the test in a car that really isn't built for evasive driving.
Yeah, I don't think you want to do very aggressive steering and that sort of thing in a T. I think that'll.
And yeah, as I say, because I don't have the side curtains, needless to say, after that trip, when I got home, I was absolutely drenched.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so.
And there was one other occasion I'd actually been out on a coffee run with the car club, and heading home, and once again it started pouring with rain. And as we know, the Model T doesn't have the best brakes, and pulling up to a T intersection, and I'm literally having to stand on the brake pedal to get this thing to pull up.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I say, because Rocky Mountain brakes, unfortunately, because they are external drums that they sit over the top of your parking brake drums,
Mm-hmm.
they were soaking wet. So it was, stopping. It took me at least 3 or 4 times the distance to pull up, and I wasn't going very fast either.
Mm-hmm. How do they? How do you balance between the transmission drum brake and the Rocky Mountain brakes? Is there some sort of a balancer, and can you adjust that while you're driving? So, like in a wet situation like that, can you use the transmission drum brake more than the Rocky Mountain brakes?
They are adjustable, so you've got to take the floor pan out to get to them, either that or crawl underneath the car. They are adjustable, but not while you're driving. So
Right.
you've got to sort of try and find a sort of a suitable balance between the two, so that you're using both of them.
Mm-hmm.
But as we know, like even the transmission brake it's nowhere near as effective as the brakes on a modern car. And Rocky Mountain
Mm-hmm.
brakes, they're not as effective either, particularly when they get wet.
When they get wet, yeah. So I was wondering if there was some way in the wet you could easily emphasize the transmission drum brake because it wouldn't be affected one way or the other by the rain. Huh. Well, there's a design opportunity there.
Even so, because we're driving a car that has brakes basically only on the back wheels, even if you do adjust them up so that your transmission brake is sort of taking the strain in wet weather, if you push them hard enough, I don't know about yours, but mine, I can, even on a dry road, if I push hard enough on the brake, the back wheels will lock up and you just skid anyway. So,
yep, I've had to do that once. Yeah, I had somebody pull out in front of me, and I stood on that and left an 11s on the road. I couldn't believe it's as if it's an invisible car the way people pull out on you.
Exactly, and I totally get what you're saying there. I've had the same thing with me. People look at it and go, "Oh, that's an old car. It's not very fast. I'll just go." And it's like, yeah, it's not very fast, but at the same time, it doesn't stop very well either.
Yeah. You can put a sign on the back that says, "Hey, I'm slow. Sorry," but you can't do anything like that on the front for the people pulling out in front of you.
That's right.
Interesting. I've got to look into those Rocky Mountain brakes some more. I kind of liking the idea of doing that. Yeah, I drive my car a lot, so someday I'm going to be real glad I did.
Yep.
So we were talking about the drone footage that you've taken, and I saw that on your YouTube channel, obviously. You've been doing YouTube Model T things for a long time.
Yeah, so I started my YouTube channel. I think it wasn't long after I'd actually bought the Model T, and I didn't really know much about YouTube at the time. I only had a handful of videos on there, which they're embarrassing, really. I don't think half of them are still there. I think I took them down. But anyway, I thought, yeah, I'd like to put some videos on YouTube. And at the time, there wasn't much on YouTube about Model Ts at all. I think there was one channel that I found on there, which is how I learned how to drive it in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that channel is still there. I've actually put a link to it on my website. As you know, I can't take the credit for I didn't teach myself how to drive the car. Put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought, well, if this person can do these sorts of videos, then I'd like to give it a try as well. And so I think my first Model T video went live in, I think it was either end of 2011 or early 2012, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Pardon me. And I think from memory, I think it's actually my most viewed video on YouTube, and that that came as a massive shock too, because it was one of those things where it sort of started out slowly, and for a long time it didn't really have much in the way of views. I think all I did was posted a link to it on the Model T forum,
Mm-hmm.
and the next thing I know, the videos are just the views are just gone out of control, and I think that one's about 3.1 million views as when we
Amazing.
recorded it. It's crazy,
Amazing.
and
Yeah.
I never expected that. So even like, none of the other videos on my channel sort of even come close. I think the closest one I think's got about 250,000 views or something, but
Mm-hmm.
which is nothing compared to 3 million. But
No,
no,
but
I was
it's still really
blown
good.
away by it. Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, your channel's very popular. Everybody I've met since I've started doing YouTube videos always references and refers to your channel as one of the subscriptions that they have, and they always keep track of. And I know
Yeah.
lately you've started doing more videos again. A lot of people have been really excited to see new videos from you after a short break.
Yeah.
So that's great.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, there was a break of 3 or 4 years, whatever it was. I had some personal issues I was going through, a marriage breakdown, those sorts of things. So it, it wasn't the best time for me, but I'm back now.
It's great to have you back. That's for sure. We really enjoy them. Um, what kind of equipment do you use for your videos generally?
Most of the time, it's just my phone.
Mm-hmm.
I've got what is it, a Samsung S20. So it's a 4-year-old phone, but it still does the job.
Mm-hmm.
I think I used an iPhone before that, and over time I sort of added to my equipment, as I could afford it, kind of thing. I bought a GoPro a few years ago, which has been used quite extensively,
Mm-hmm.
and then of course I've now got my second drone now. So yeah,
Oh, wow. Oh, so we can look forward to more drone footage of Model T.
yeah. Look, I'd love to do that. I need to find some new locations to use it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know about Canada or the US, but in Australia they're actually quite strict on where you can and can't fly drones. So I have to
Mm-hmm.
be very careful on that front.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, it's the same here. I understand. I don't know the rules, but I know there are rules.
Yeah. Here it's in terms of altitude, 120 meters is the highest you're allowed to fly. And then you're not allowed to fly within 5 kilometers of any active airport or heliport or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And equally, if you are out flying and you become aware of other aircraft in the air, then you have to bring the drone down until that aircraft is well out of the way, sort of thing. So,
Right.
um, Yeah, and you're not supposed to fly them over areas where there's sort of like large groups of people. So,
Hmm.
I see drone footage all the time of people flying them over car shows and that sort of thing, and I'm thinking,
Hmm.
not
Yeah.
really supposed to do that.
Yeah.
But no, we all
Yeah.
have good fun.
Yeah. Cool. So what have you got planned for your channel and for your tea in the coming months?
A lot of times, what I try to do is, as much as possible, I try to try to keep up with the comments on my videos and try and get an idea of what people want to see. There'll be spoiler alert, there will be a 100th birthday celebration for my Model T at least in the coming months. I
Hmm.
actually tracked down when my Model T was built. Actually, it turns out it was actually built in June 1924.
Hmm.
So around June, keep an eye on my channel. You'll see the a birthday video coming up.
Sounds good. Yeah. Any big projects on the car that are in your future?
Well, as I mentioned before, I would have liked to have got the car repainted, but the other part of me is sort of looking at it and thinking, well, if I repaint it, that's sort of it's covering up its history in a way, if that makes
Hmm.
sense.
Yeah.
Taking old paint off and putting new paint on it, it's not it's no. I think I'll keep it as it is, or as long as I possibly can.
Hmm.
So yeah, that project's it's not in the near future as far as that goes, and no, I can't really think of any other projects that I'd want to do in terms of changing the car. It runs fantastic, and most of the maintenance work that I needed to do on it, I've already done it, and most of those, actually, pretty much all of those, are actually been made into videos on my channel anyway. And how about your Model T? Is what's on the horizon for yours?
Oh wow. As I said, the list is long, but the it I get through it very slowly. Um, well, I wanted to take the inspection panel off the bottom of the engine and check all my bearings and um, piston rod, babbitt, and all that sort of thing. I don't hear a lot of loud knocking or anything like that, but I'm a little suspicious that things might be getting loose in there. Um,
Yeah,
I'm currently rebuilding a uh, rear axle from parts that I've collected, all used parts for the most part that I've collected, and I'd like to get that finished in the next month or two, and then swap it into the car and take the one that's in the car out, and then over time rebuild that one and have it kind of
that's
like
right.
a spare on the side. So that project's underway, but not proceeding as fast as I'd like. That's for sure. Um,
Hmm.
I'm running Model A wheels right now, while my Model T wire wheels are off because I wanted to rebuild the Model T wire wheels, and I haven't even started, but that's why they're off, is so I can do that. They're pretty rusty. They need a lot of attention, a lot of weld up a few broken spokes and straighten the spokes, and do a lot of sanding and filling, and then refinishing. Model T wire wheels are pretty rare up here, and pretty expensive, so I'd like to keep
Yeah,
those in really good condition. So I'm running the Model A wheels because they're less, they're much less expensive and much more available up here. And I'm running 19-inch Model A wheels, so I've got a lot more rubber on the car than it was ever intended to have, and it's been kind of fun just seeing how the car behaves differently, and how
yeah.
it rides and how it steers and handles with the bigger rubber. Bigger. They still look skinny to most people, but any Model T enthusiast will know right away that I've done something funky with those big tires on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, even mine, as you know, has still got the original wooden wheels on it, and but it also had the demountable split rims on it, so it runs the I think they're 4.5 inch from memory,
Hmm.
or 21 inch,
Yeah.
um, and as opposed to the 3.5 inch clinchers, which I'm glad it doesn't have them on it because they're a nightmare.
I think they'd ride really rough, I would expect, and they're hard to mount and demount. I understand.
Yeah, and look, the demountable rims, they're fantastic as well. I say I've had to take, what did I have done? Oh, that's right. I had to have a new inner tube put in the spare wheel,
Mm-hmm.
and when they pulled it apart at the tire shop, the tube that was in it was no wonder it was flat. The tube inside it, I don't think the tire had been used in decades. The tube had actually perished,
Oh, okay.
which I find amazing to think how that's happened inside a tire. You know, no sunlight on it, and the rubber's just
Yeah.
turned to confetti sort of thing. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I say no, getting the wheels off and off on and off. I say the demountable rims makes a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess the only other thing on my list is upholstery. My upholstery is terrible, so I've bought the supplies. I just need the motivation to start sewing and fitting. It's a
Yeah.
job I don't relish doing, but boy, it'll sure be nice when it's done.
Yeah, the only upholstery work I had to get done on mine when I brought mine over from the US, the top wasn't actually attached to the bows. It was the tail end of a restoration that never got completed because the original, rather the owner had passed away. So I had to, and my knowledge on a sewing machine is very limited. It's about as good as my carpentry skills, I think. So I had to find a local upholsterer to finish the job for me, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Pardon me. And he did a very good job, actually. I've got to say, and it's lasted all this time. So
Good. Well, you run with your top up a lot, so it would need to be a good job, or you'd know it right away.
and especially when if I'm going to a car show that's some distance away, then I know you're not supposed to admit this, but I put my car on the trailer sometimes for car shows that are some distance away, and going along the highway at 100 kilometers an hour on the trailer doesn't seem to bother it. So the top hasn't flown off or anything. So yeah,
That's good.
it was a really good job.
Good. Yeah, I've never trailered mine yet. It'd be lovely to have an enclosed trailer, but that's not in my near future, I don't think.
And look, and actually, even with the top, well, you can put the top down, but even with the top up, Model Ts are, I think they're about 7 foot something tall. They're quite tall, and even like in the garage that my Model T lives in, with the top up, it clears the door with about 5 millimeters to spare. I think was
Oh
the
dear.
clearance.
Oh dear.
So,
That is close. Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
close. Yeah.
they're a very tall car. Yep.
So, and as you're saying, yeah, about an enclosed trailer, I think I'd need a very large, very tall trailer, which, with what I use to tow it, I really need to keep fuel consumption down, and I think a big box is just going to make matters worse.
Indeed. Yeah, fuel prices keep climbing.
Absolutely, it's funny because as I mentioned earlier, I used to drive a Tesla, and plugging it in at home, I think a full charge on that thing cost me about $12.
Mhm.
And now after I sold that, I bought a Ram 2500, and that thing
Oh
cost me
boy.
about $200. Yeah, it's a big difference. It cost me about
Yep.
$200 at the moment to fill the tank. So yeah,
Yeah, you really notice the difference between an electric car and a gas car when you fill up the gas car or the diesel car. That's for sure. And for some reason, the last few months, diesel's been so much more expensive than gasoline
yeah,
around here, which is frustrating because I have a diesel Ram and same problem. It's over $200 to fill it now,
yeah, yeah.
and it empties the tank pretty fast because it's these big trucks.
Well, that
Mhm.
depends on if you're a lead foot or not.
Yeah, yeah. You can only drive so gently in these great big trucks. I think.
Yeah,
Um, I've even got the manual transmission in mine, and it's even so it
yeah.
it drinks the fuel.
Okay. No, the it doesn't matter which RAM you buy here. The manual's not available here. Actually, you can only get them in auto. So,
Hmm.
and I think look, if I drive mine, I'll say gently, I get it probably about 800 kilometers out of a tank,
Hmm. That's pretty good for a big truck, really.
which for a 6.7 liter diesel is pretty good.
Yeah. So what? Well, when you're at car shows, what else do you talk to people about with respect to your car, their cars, that sort of thing? What are the topics of discussion?
I'll give you another true story. I had one of the earlier car shows I went to. I think I'd only had the Model T for about a year or 2 years at most. And this one car show, this elderly lady comes up to me. And I think she must have been about, I don't know, late 70s, early 80s, something like that. Anyway, and fair dinkum, she was completely serious with me, and she says, "Oh, have you had this car from new?" And I looked at her and I'm thinking, "Hmm, yeah, I look good for 120 years old, don't I?"
Yeah, yeah,
But the funny thing
uh,
is, she was actually serious. I thought she
yeah.
was joking, but no, she was dead serious.
She must have lost track of time somewhere along the way there.
I think so.
Oh, that's funny.
And the other questions that get asked a lot, because I always go through the same sort of explanation. They sort of I have a sort of like an information board which I stand in front of the car,
Mhm.
for people to have a read of to learn about it. I always love educating people on it. And one of the things that comes up a lot, because what I've explained on there is how you got no water pump, no fuel pump, no oil pump, and technically no distributor either.
Mhm.
And they look at me and say, "Well, how does it work then?" And
Mhm.
to see the looks on their faces is it's priceless.
Yeah, the buzz coils get people's attention, that's for sure, because they're so different, and yet modern technology has come around to the same thing. The new,
Hmm.
LS1 V8s have one coil for every spark plug, and they do shower of sparks, just like the old Model T.
Yep.
Model T had it right the first time.
Yeah, yeah. It's crazy. You look at cars from, when they introduced the modern distributor. That sort of idea. Um, and one coil. I mean, how stupid is that? I've seen Model Ts where you can run it on one cylinder if you've got three coils that are not working. So
Hmm.
whereas obviously in a car with one coil, if that goes, well, you're not going anywhere.
Hmm. Yeah, pretty neat. Now, speaking of running on one cylinder or something like that, have you ever been stranded or had any big breakdowns on your drives?
Oh, yeah, I guess you could call it a breakdown. There was and it's only ever happened the once. I was coming home from a car show, and I don't think it was even a particular. No, I wasn't even on a hill. No, it was on level ground, and the engine started coughing and spluttering, and I thought, what's going on? And at first, I'm thinking, no, I definitely put fuel in it, and thought, okay, I wonder if it's a spark problem, and I thought, well, not really with the way it's behaving. Anyway, I pulled over. It was coughing and backfiring and carrying on. I could not figure out what the problem was, and it wasn't until I sort of revved the engine up, and it made it. It was still backfiring, but it sort of ran a little bit better. And then I adjusted the fuel mixture needle to try and make it a bit richer, and it was still coughing and carrying. And I'm thinking, this thing's I think it's got some dirt gotten into the air intake. And sure enough, that is actually what had happened. It,
Hmm.
it had sucked a bit of dirt in, and I don't know if it had jammed the needle or something in the carburetor.
Hmm.
Anyway, I thought, well, there's not much I can really do about it, so I took a different street to come home, which involved going down a fairly steep hill. And I was like, well, I don't usually like running the Model T at high speed, but I thought, well, I've got to do something to try and get it to clear its throat, and that's the best I could come up with. Go down a steep hill and just basically just run the engine as fast as I could, and eventually, yeah, it cleared its throat and it came good, and it was fine, and it's never given me any trouble since.
That's pretty good. Yep, I like it. They seem to be pretty reliable, and I guess they
Mm.
had to be in those days. You'd be out there on your own in the middle of nowhere for the most part, and you'd be relying on that car to get you home.
Yeah. Probably one good question we could ask each other is I think what's have you ever had any embarrassing experiences with your Model T?
Oh wow, let me think about that. Well, I had trouble getting it started at a car show once with everybody watching. That was embarrassing. I don't know what I did wrong. I probably had something too rich or too lean, or I don't know what it was, but I just had to kind of stop and start again, and then everything was fine. But when you go to start Model T at the car show, a crowd gathers because everybody wants to see the cranking, and just everything about it is so weird. But of course, that's when you get all nervous and mess something up. Embarrassing moments. Embarrassing moments. Can't think of anything. I'll keep thinking about that while you answer the same question. See if I have any others.
Yeah, I can actually, off the top of my head, I can actually remember about three separate occasions where, maybe even four actually, embarrassing situations. Probably the very first one was actually was on my way to a car show, and I had a good friend with me in the car at the time, and I think we were probably half a kilometre away from our destination, and I ran out of ran out of fuel.
Oops. Yep.
Completely, tank was dry, and it couldn't have picked a more embarrassing place to actually run out of fuel either. It was right out the front of a school, and it was first thing in the morning. So yeah, all the kids were there, and then next thing this old car sort of coughs and splutters to a stop right out the front of the school. That was sort of part one of the embarrassment there. Part two was having to try and flag somebody down with a tow rope to actually tow me to the nearest fuel station to refill it.
Oh dear. Yeah, that'd be a good one. I know
another time. Go on.
I know getting in and out of mine is difficult. I'm not a big guy, but squeezing behind that steering wheel is difficult. Now my car does have a door on the driver's side, but you've got the parking brake lever there, and you're trying to get in that way under the steering wheel is a real thing. I got so frustrated with it, I made myself a removable steering wheel adapter so you can take the wheel off to get in and out, and that made things a lot nicer. But there was no elegant way to get in and out of that car, I found.
There is actually an accessory you can buy for the Model T, and it's literally called the Fat Man steering wheel. The idea, it's the gadget itself is made of brass, and it fits over the end of the steering wheel shaft, and then the steering wheel mounts onto it, and it's actually the device itself is actually hinged.
Okay.
So you undo a catch underneath it, and you literally fold the steering wheel up so that you can get into the car easier, and then it just locks back into place. But yeah, I think if I remember right, it's literally called the Fat Man steering wheel.
Good name. Yep. Yeah.
And now the other embarrassing situation I was going to bring up was, and it can only ever happen at a car show. The first occasion, this first one, I was trying to start the car at the end of the show to go home, and invariably there's all people watching. And of course, car didn't want to start. It was just stone dead, or cranking it over. Not even a peep out of the coils. It was just quiet, and that should have actually set off. It should have actually alerted me to what the problem was, but it didn't. And of course, as always, I ended up overthinking the situation. Opened up the hood, tinkering under there, checking the first thing I ended up doing weirdly was checking the spark plug leads, even though the car was running fine before that. And it was checking the spark plugs was my undoing, because my girlfriend at the time decided to actually reach in and turn on the ignition.
Oh dear.
while I had my hand on one of the plugs.
That gets your attention, doesn't it?
It did.
Mhm.
It did, and
Yeah.
got everybody else's attention as well. Everybody was laughing their heads off.
That can leave you with a sore arm for a few hours. That gives you quite a jolt. I think everybody who's
It does.
got a Model T has experienced that at some point or another.
20,000 volts. It's uncomfortable.
It is.
And the only other one that springs to mind, and it's happened on two separate occasions, and it actually happened on the most recent car show I went to as well. I always get in the habit of whenever I stop Model T and switch it off, is I'll shut the fuel off because otherwise, mine in particular, it's actually got a leaky fuel tap on it, which I've still haven't gotten around to fixing. Anyway. On this particular occasion, I'd forgotten to turn the fuel off. And so when it came time to leave, just out of habit, I lift the bonnet and turn the fuel tap. Didn't even check which way the tap was facing.
You were turning it off.
Anyway, I was turning it off, yeah. So the inevitable happens. The car started fine. And I got as far as the gate to leave the showground. And, of course, it started misfiring, carrying on. Then it coughed to a stop in the middle of the street. And on the most recent occasion that happened, I had a good idea what had happened. It's like, I remember this. But the very first time it happened, I must have spent 10 minutes blocking the exit to the showground, scratching my head trying to figure out why I didn't want to start, and other experts coming up and trying to offer their assistance on a car they knew nothing about.
Many experts, yes.
Oh, yeah. And the same thing happened. It turned out that actually earlier on during the show, I'd actually done a demonstration of how to start the car, which obviously always draws a crowd.
Yeah, there's no question that I find that operator error is more often the cause of problems with this car than the car itself.
But if I had to pick the most embarrassing out of all of them was by far running out of fuel right at the front of a school.
Yeah, but that was exciting for all those kids. That made their day.
Oh, they loved it. It would have been exciting for them, but it was more the embarrassment of being towed to the nearest fuel station to get some more fuel.
Towing T's, they don't like being towed either because there's no true neutral, of course, so it's tricky. Just got to let those gears buzz around in there, I guess.
Yeah, I just had to. The person that was towing me, I just said, try and drive slowly. This, not least of which because it's an old car. But as you say, even when it's in neutral, there's still some moving parts in there which don't really like being forced to turn by something other than the engine.
Yeah, I think Model T's great for generating stories. They're just so different. Well, Mitch, I've had a great time talking to you here today, and really appreciate you joining me here on Flivver Channel Talks. Thanks for staying up late and joining me in my early morning time zones. Frustrating, but we managed to find a time that works, so thank you very much.
No, you're most welcome. It's been an absolute pleasure joining you, mate.
So we'll keep an eye on your channel and hope we can stay in touch and talk some more sometime in the future.
I look forward to it, mate. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.